Today's discussion is brought to you by the Linnet, and Blue Juice is back on the menu.
This is going to be the discussion for 8.76, which that is a lot of chapters, isn't it? That's amazing to me. 76 chapters into Volume 8, and we are getting to just a tiny bit of discussion, which again, for those who were not here before we hit record, the puns are welcome. This is the a tiny discussion because we are talking about a chapter almost entirely dedicated to Freyerlings, and not just one tiny Freyerling with a company of Antinium and gnolls and goblins in a mixed force, which even Foliana and Perorn think is new. But we're looking at everybody else, the folks on Balros, the much not seen storyline this volume. So I guess I'm going to start with the questions that we had here in the Google Doc. Just starting at the one that really is the most general for the chapter, or at the beginning, and that is, let's see, it's just talking about the general situation about the Titan and about the Freyerling. So I'm going to make this one kind of a good place to start. We had a question from someone about why setting up a Freyerling colony where they could live amongst the tall folk, because we've discovered in all these recent chapters that they live very isolated, and that hiding is their main way of keeping themselves alive when they have to fight literal Creelers in giant Iron Man suits, which I think is the way that you would want to fight them. But why didn't it work? Why didn't Nir's effort to build his own kind of new city based on volunteers, and because he is apparently quite popular amongst young Freyerlings, especially who are wanting to go out and see new things and be adventurous? Why didn't it work? So I'm just going to throw that one out there, and what do you guys think?
I've got one.
Go ahead, Linnet.
I think that every young Freyerling is fascinated by the outside and wants to know what it's like because they grow up hearing stories about all these different beasts and animals and birds and what have you, and things that you have to be careful for. And when you're young, yeah, that sounds exciting. Yeah, I want to go to the wilds of Vancouver and hike up in the mountains, and I hear there are grizzlies. Maybe I'll see a grizzly. Until you actually see a grizzly, in which case you never really want to ever do that again. I think that a lot of them grew up, tried to go through tall guard training, and realized, shit, this is hard, and those are frickin' scary. I'm gonna go back to my condo in the tree.
Do you want to add something, Gardner, or do you just want us to read the comment again? So just like any of the other discussions, if you want to actually speak on the recording, just go ahead and at either me or Linnet, or just do an. Sorry for mispronouncing that, by the way. Sorry. Or we can just do a general ad here in the talks and reaction and comments channel. And then if you don't want to do that, just go and talk in the live talks chat, so you can follow along there.
Oh yeah, sorry. I just wanted to make a little comment that I'm kind of in the same vein as what Lynette said. It's easy to talk about leaving the city. It's hard to actually do it. There's like a lot of consideration, especially when leaving the city doesn't only include like just packing all your things, but also battling large animals which can eat you easily or punch you and cause you to die immediately.
So this one is a comment from Comrade Burv. So he said that I found it subtly sad that Nir set up the whole place in hopes that he could make a safe place when Freylings could come from all over the world to be protected, and got a ending left on read from the rest of his people. Or left on red.
And looks like Rosie also has a comment. Rosie?
Yeah, one that goes kind of Lou Dancer's point, which I think part of the reason Nir's has failed is because, and I think this is one of the greatest things the gnomes ever did for the Freyerlings, was leaving them with a species-wide project, something they can all work towards, that gives them a goal they can work for as a society, which is unraveling all of these mysteries that were left for them. And because of that, what is there necessary besides, a sense of adventure to find things like the Fairlings who are living in the Dyed Lands for that goal? Because of that, there's no real need to find something bigger or greater. It's right there for them. And that has led to them, I think, being able to exist as a closed off society. And then going along with that, I think part of the reason is that why years failed is anyone who's learned enough about the outside world realizes how easy it would be for someone like, we've seen in this chapter multiple people who, even as they're trying to protect the Fairlings, are absolutely willing to sell their secrets, are absolutely willing to, try to gouge them for these magical items. Things that even if, a whole new city was set up, like some of the Fairlings said, that Niers might have wanted to do, imagine the demand that would have been made for their materials that they just can't crank out. The demand then would have grown into, oh, well, teach us. Well, then suddenly, they're either being held hostage as slaves to create objects to teach people secrets, or they're being attacked because they're an in-demand commodity. So I think it's just that twofold of, if they do exist outside, they're a commodity. And if they don't, there's no need to, because they have their own thing to do, and that's unraveling the gnome mysteries.
I think it's a really good point. We got another comment here from Spanner saying, Fairlings are truly the answer to the question, would you rather fight one horse-sized duck or 100 duck-sized horses? The answer is no. Kind of a general, if I definitely want to invite more people to comment on this and just on Fairling culture or cities in general. But does it matter? I think that they they have multi-generational aspects to these. Like if you didn't get born in one of the cities that is an actual city and is more like the rest of the Toll folk settlements, would you naturally have grown up more adventurous, and would that also lose the appeal? Or just, I think it's kind of like a lose-lose proposition, because if you're a city folk person, you're maybe not all that equipped to actually go and join one of these expeditions. And then if you're in one of these smaller settlements and you've grown up without all the niceties there, then you don't really want to go and visit and get smushed by the tall people already, since you're already fighting off insects and cats and things like that.
Well, we kind of see the same thing on Earth. You live anywhere near a grocery store, you don't actually have to go and, kill your own hog or check drought lines or anything like that. You can just, do you know how to clean a fish? I mean, anybody here, raise your hand. Do you know how to clean a fish?
Presumably with water.
No, you need a knife. There's gutting involved and descaling and what have you, but we don't have a need for this, because there are people who do it for us, and thus some of the knowledge is lost. So you've got an Alchemagus Resk, who is sheltered but extremely knowledgeable in some areas, because he doesn't have to know about some of the other things.
I didn't see this as a question that we got forwarded, but it was one that I had in particular as I was watching the stream. And it's about Resk and his viewpoint. It's like, is anybody else surprised at the fact that they're opening up more just by virtue of they're not getting more insular during a crisis? They're actually opening up more to these people. Does it matter that for his perspective, he's actually visiting a city for the first time, and he's just like, y'all have dirt roads. You can't cure the common cold? What the hell's wrong with you people? He's just not impressed. And so now he's just like, I don't know what we were scared of. You're tall, but you're stupid.
Lou Dancer says, I think Niers's plan would have had more success, but Fairlings already have a species-wide project, which is what Rosie had commented on before. Comrade Burv says, most Fairling cities aren't first founding cities and wouldn't have their last boxes. Yeah, they would probably be able to up and move around if they needed to. Jason says, their culture feels like what would happen if you sent out a bunch of colony ships to different star systems after fleeing a dying one, and they haven't all reconnected, yet.
Comrade Burv has a shout out to Knife. Bad Knife, not Good Knife. Bad Knife from Volume 1. Bad Knife knows what it did.
Don't slice your hand open and almost die like Aaron did. Spanner says, I feel that the small settlement Frerlings would be higher leveled, but the city folk have the building on technology over time, so there's bound to be a disconnect as well as some skill loss over time. I agree with that.
So you wanted to comment?
All right, two things. One, to Burr's comment on the last bit about that Frailing sittings, the first ones aren't first founding, don't have their last boxes. And I think we're seeing the fallout from that in trying to compartmentalize their society to protect itself, they've actually opened it up to weaknesses, because we saw the betrayal of Frailings who didn't have the technology to protect themselves, the ability of tall folk to hold those Frailings hostage, to see that even with a fraction of the power of a place like Paith, they have so much to offer. So I think we see actually the downfall of this kind of society, which is really interesting. And on the other hand, I think it's interesting, like what you were asking about, Blue Juice, with the idea of them seeing what civilization is like, and that it is interesting. I think they're becoming more open, but you have to note they're becoming open only to Earthers. And part of the reason, I think, is in a way the Earthers are on a level playing field with them. Not in terms of technology, not in terms of knowledge, but in the fact that the Earthers have no real allegiance to any faction, to any species on this continent, because they're from another world. And they also, as Luan said, have a secret they're holding hostage that could make them become hostages, just as the Frailings would become hostages to other species because they are super powerful but very tiny. The Earthers would become hostages, like to the one dude, Yazdil, for their own knowledge, and they're relatively powerless in this world. So there is actually kind of an equal playing field where the Earthers can at least exchange ideas to the Frailings. I mean, you can't tell me that the Frailings wouldn't nut over a complete periodic table or the bombs. Oh, are you kidding me? Jesus Christ. So I think it's really interesting that they are opening up, but only to Earthers. And I think that's important to note for the future, and why we might see, as they're talking about, will they survive being on Baleros? Can Luan just ship them all in all the pun ways over, that they might end up going to Israel or somewhere? I can definitely see that happening because they're going to be able to trust the Earthers.
I think I called their joint perspective in stream chat something like first worlder problems. It's like they might as well be from a different world, the Frailings, because of how insular it is from the rest of their society, and the Earthers have kind of the same mentality. So they're looking at the experiences in history from kind of a similar perspective, and just in terms of what their quality of life is, and everything else is just kind of like meh, not problems that they're used to having.
Maybe also has a comment. Maybe you want to talk? Maybe.
The comment that they wrote
okay.
was Earthers are the budget gnomes.
Okay. All right. So, and remember, if you're typing in reactions channel, it means you either want us to read it out loud or you're going to say it. Okay. Kermit says, I want to see Frailings make a new city in the Garden of Sanctuary. It would be a perfect place for them. I disagree with that completely, because the garden only exists as a skill, and it's only ever one in the world at a time. And if something happens to the person who owns that skill, the garden goes away for a while.
But would the Frailings consider that to be a downside?
Yeah, I'm against Linnet on this one. I actually think it would be a really cool place for them, because they like interacting with wildlife, and like they clearly have like pet aphids and things like that. They would freak out if they were in a place where all the big things weren't allowed to hurt them, and they would, again, the first world of perspective. I can hug the thing. The thing isn't going to smush me.
Yeah, but
They would be all down for it.
There are no bugs in the garden. There were no fish in the garden, except for the plant life, which may have just spontaneously appeared when the skill went active. There were no other living things. So what happens?
I'm gonna say I'm gonna counter that with the idea of Frailings getting a ride on the beaver cavalry with a little Frailing mount.
Now, I will say that we'll have to see what happens when the goblins up in Anazurhe's territory actually break into somebody's skill maze thing from the outside. If that happens, then maybe I can see the Frailings or somebody else setting up shop or living in the Garden of Sanctuary. But
So
as of right
Rosie
now, I don't
had a
see it.
rejoinder to that as well. She said, "Consider the Garden of Sanctuary a staging ground to build a new home in the high passes, where the big things are too big to even bother with them, but keep away the other bigger things." And I will disagree with that slightly because Nier's experience in the high passes was not exactly a fun vacation. And Lewd Dancer is agreeing with you, Linnet, that there were no bugs in the garden, which I don't know if you're right. They may not see that as a positive or a negative because they keep bugs as pets. And then Visionary had to mention that the garden has a real door and that the space should exist when the skill is not owned by anyone.
Dancer also said he found it kind of funny that Fairlings were like, your Earther tech is garbage, when bombs, which Fairlings use the magical equivalent of in all their gear, are being built in the basement. Verve says, I think it's definitely immoral of them to have the literal cure for cancer and they keep it to themselves. Like, that's not an individual failing. Every one of them is like, yeah, that's not something the world needs to know.
And Verve had another comment about the garden. He said if they were trapped in the garden after the owner of the skill died, they would not have any way to get any new resources and they might end up starving. And Yash has got their hand raised. I think you had a comment earlier, Yash, so please feel free to speak.
Hi. I feel like the Fairlings are more open with the authors, and more than that, I think they're very competitive, and they're in general very competitive with the tall folk, and they tend to look down on tall folk technology, and it it's almost as if they found a competent competitor in the authors as opposed to the tall folk who they already look down upon when it comes to technology and magic. And that's why they were so open. I don't think it was intended. I don't think they wanted to share their information. It's just that their lack of respect or their general disdain for the tall folk sort of prompted them to show off, and they got into a battle of who's got the bigger horse with the authors. Like, that's my perspective on this.
I think that's a fairly good one as well. Just the fact that they're so used to not having people to share their accomplishments with. It's not just that they have to keep it secret. There's no intellectual curiosity amongst the people. Like, elevators are exciting to them, and like they were still mad at Luan because he wasn't impressed with their lifting technology. And it's like, come on, we make things go up high quickly. You should be impressed. And now they actually get to talk unreservedly about those things. And I think that probably is quite a new and a novel experience. And like you said, they might be a bit unguarded about it because they are not used to it in any way. Do you have any more comments about Fairling technology, or like about the reason that they were more open to the Earthers? And do we think that that'll also be the case for more of the people like Kisselt, they were willing to sell the Fairling technology too, despite the dangers?
But with Kisselt, I think it was more transactional and they weren't ready to open up about their technology. And I feel like even the comms device, the Fairlings are somehow going to take it back because they know the economic worth of what they're handing over to him, and they will somehow find a way to retrieve it, or they'll destroy it so that he's not able to further use that technology, because they do seem pretty guarded about it and they do know the worth of what they are giving out or what they're sharing, except with the Earthers, because to them the Earthers have already got it, and they were frankly surprised that the Earthers having so much didn't have simple cures like the cure for cancer and baldness.
I don't think they do know the worth of what they're handing out, honestly. I think they know the worth among other Fairlings of what they're handing out, and they do think that this is a valuable gift, but I don't think they realize exactly how astonishing and awe-inspiring and, wait, they can do what? That everybody else is going to look at and see what they've done, because I don't think even the tall guard, only Nears would know exactly what's available and what's not. And he spent the last 50 years downplaying his entire race's ability to do things, and caught him sort of let the cat out of the bag after 3 days. It's gonna be
Except they won't tell us what Signym does. Anyway.
I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about it.
But then, so we do have Rosie wanting to make a comment here.
Many things have been said. I'm still trying to gather thoughts, but I think all of it together goes to show, I think part of it is all of this interconnectedness. Like, the world really doesn't know what the Furlings have. I think Peklerim, as we've seen in this chapter, comes the closest, but as you said, Nears has downplayed. So I don't know if Peklerim even knows the full scale of everything that they can do, whether that's as a species, like Foliana struggling to sneak up on them, or technologically wise. And I think what we're seeing is with Kisil, he is bargaining with them the same way that Ryoka was with Tyriarch. Like, how much can I ask? Is greater invisibility actually hard for them? And it really wasn't. It was a pain in the ass, but they were like, we just can't give it to them because we are pretty dang sure that this isn't. So it's kind of funny that they're both bargaining on ends of, I think the Furlings really don't know where society is. At this point, as we've known, society has lost a lot of knowledge, and the Furlings just don't know what's been lost and what's been kept. So with the Earthers, you think about it, they're amazed by things like them curing cancer, but pretty much everyone in the world has no idea what the fuck cancer even is at this point. So I think it's something where we are definitely seeing, I'm trying to think, like a blind man's transaction, or just a loss of information that I think is going to come up again and again as a big issue for them, as they're trying to hold their cards close to the chest. But the problem is they don't know what the deck is, but neither does anyone else. And so it's just caused this massive escalation of people wanting the deck with having no idea what it is, how explosive it is, how to deal with it. Hence why they're now burning down an entire forest and assuming that they're just going to survive. So yeah.
Edge Dancer says he doesn't think it's as bad as what I was saying. He says that they could believe what the Furlings are handing out are hoarded relics, not things they are just like, sure.
Speaking
Hush
of
says,
hordes, yes.
go
Oh, you got to the Hush comment first. Go ahead. I was
No.
going to say, but if you're going to have a horde, a pirate horde's not a bad one.
Hush says, until we see Furling pirates, TWI will forever be a suboptimal story. Maybe the expansion we all need is Payeth escaping to sail the seven seas and plunder deserving tall folk.
Now
I would
does
read
kind
that
of
fanfic. I would so read that. Somebody
that
write
does
it.
kind of advance to where, I mean, this is a little bit less structured of a discussion, I think, because the past, or the actual chapter itself isn't so much it does exist in a chronological order, but almost all the events are kind of simultaneous, and it's all about the preparation and pushback of these different Frailing settlements and cities. So also like kind of like a broad aspect of Frailing culture and how they're reacting to getting invaded. We do uncover the nature of the plots to a certain extent. Obviously, I think we don't know everything, or this would be a concluded story arc, not the beginning of a story arc. But the big mystery that is embedded in the chapter, and the big thing that we learn, is about the boxes. And because there are so many comments about, are the boxes ships, or things like that, I think that it's not a bad place to go from the pirate talk to asking about what's in the box. What's in the box? Which is the actual name of the Google Doc right now, apparently, as well. So you're not the only folks who've been thinking it. The dancer's like, what's in the box? The deets on the gods. That might actually be true. That's not a terrible theory at all. And then a very nice comment from Gunman Dude for Linnet to read. I will pass that along to you, since you got called out for that one. And it's about the general structure of the chapter, as I was just commenting. So it's not about a box. He has no box theory, but we will welcome any box theories at this time.
Gunman says, I find it ironic that despite the Ocean 11's-esque degree of planning against the Forgotten Wing Company by Peclear, he seems so fantastically stupid in hindsight. His boss is Nears, the greatest strategist in the world, the hero of his race. If Peclear's goal was to freely shape change, he should have asked Nears to help him out. Nears could have absolutely leveraged his reputation among his people to help Peclear out.
That is probably true. Like I think, like I said, I don't think that we understand the entirety of the plot or how things are playing out. I think it's also interesting to see that Nears and Foliana have so many different or like they're aware that a trap's been sprung. I think the thing that has been most interesting on the plot kind of storyline, which was, I was actually kind of surprised that that wasn't a question that came in before the chapter, was what do we think the shape of the plot is, or what do we think the traps that are going to spring are. It's just that Nears has been so nonplussed about getting home. Like, he's taking his time. Like, I imagine he could marshal a lot more resources and go back and fight what is an attempted Fairling genocide. And I don't know if it's just that he's so overconfident because he knows what the Fairling's capabilities are and he assumes that his enemies don't, or he is got a kind of a plan that he's put a lot of faith in Foliana for. So that was my kind of question about that. But I have diverted us from box talk, which is the important part of the discussion. So forgive me. And we had a couple more box comments as I was waiting for those to come in. We've got a few it looks like we have another request for Linnet to read one, but we also had again more comments that were responding to the plot and to the shape of the chapter and Gunman Dude's comment in particular. And one was from Lewd Dancer saying Peklier was an asset to Nears, but not that much of an asset. The Fairlings wouldn't have willingly given that up. Finally, a box comment. We have one from Edmund Alcorn. The box probably contains plans for a rocket or something so that they can get to the moon, where the gnomes left a message, maybe about the gods. And Trustworthy Sean has got a What's in the Box Wrong Answers Only edition. Mating Rituals 4, the Volume 1 rewrite. Another smaller box. The question to the life, universe, and everything. Aaron's love interest.
Sean, I will bonk you on Wiggle's behalf, and then I will unbonk you because I love that. Okay.
Violet has another theory. Box is a congratulation note saying you have reached our level, take more stuff.
Rosie says, I think the box being a rocket is only half of it. It's probably more like a self-sustaining biome they can yeet to the moon on, like Aaron's garden, but tech. And Spanner says, just the number 42 in the box.
Well,
guys
Comrade
are
Burv,
all
you didn't get
silly.
skipped. Comrade is, or Burv is saying you got skipped. You didn't get skipped so much as we'll go back to talking about gnome lore later. We definitely need to talk about gnomes. And obviously the boxes are coming from the gnomes, but I think we will definitely maybe even conclude the actual chapter discussion with some like gnome theories, because they loom large, which is ironic for gnomes.
We don't know how tall they were.
We know they were taller than Fairlings, so that's nice. I like the sentiment that they just like pass along the title to the Fairlings. They're like, "Oh, we used to be the smallest. Now you're the smallest. You guys are awesome."
I heard somebody once call Nears a little bit of a jerk. And he's like, everybody calls me little.
Hush had another comment saying the box is definitely a prank. It's going to be something like the prize was the journey. Lewd Dancer had a more serious theory, although honestly, considering that the gnomes are pranksters, I don't think that that's actually a bad theory that it's a prank or that there's nothing inside. But their theory is that they are instructions on how to become the third furthest travelers. So it would be interdimensional shenanigans that would be a cool final gift.
And if the prize was the journey, Rosie responds with, this is also a solid theory along the lines again of a giant team-building puzzle to help them stay alive and together.
I know that the life
What if
universe
it's
and
dragon
everything.
eggs?
What if
Like,
it's what
sorry
now?
for butting.
Oh, the
Dragon eggs.
dragoness is in the box. You've won a companion podcast. Thank you for playing. Just Oshi and Dragoness are in the box doing a real time podcast about the Fairlings. The real box was the friends we made along the way. Oh, thank you, Spanner. All right, no, Kel has an. Oh goodness, dragon eggs! I thought you said dragoness. I thought you were giving a shout out to our erstwhile podcast host. And go subscribe to No Killing Goblins if you haven't, by the way, because obviously awesome. So yeah, let me let you explain your dragon eggs theory, please, if you're
I
willing
mean,
to share.
I mean, that was like a very nice like shout out to Dragoness, and then I felt bad.
No,
Okay.
no, I just literally, it's not even that you mispronounced, or that it was just that my audio cut out for a second, so I really thought you said dragoness. I'm so sorry, and I didn't mean to talk over you there, so please, dragon eggs is not a bad theory at all.
Like Niers knows that there's two, and there's probably more. He probably suspects that what's in the box is dragon eggs, and maybe the gnomes were the last people to raise the dragons, or maybe because there has definitely been a sort of mass extinction of a lot of species, and all of them roughly happened around the same time. And I bet, oh, what if it's the baby gnome? Because there are two boxes. Like there are multiple boxes. What if it's like baby gnomes cryogenically frozen or like in a stasis spell so that they can repopulate the earth?
So then we really have to get the whole unfreezing thing figured out so that we can get the baby gnomes. That would be amazing. I love it.
No one has even went ahead and suggested something like a cookie making factory, and I'm slightly disappointed that Earth's knowledge of gnomish culture is so lacking, and it's not showing up here. I like that we've been right about some things about the fantasy creatures. If the gnomes were actually famous for cookies, I think that would make me very happy. Yeah, Spanner's pointing out that the gnomes refused to breed, and that was part of the lore. And Kel is picking up what I'm putting down. He's saying that, am I suggesting that the very first gnome founding city was Keebler? And you are correct, sir. You are correct, sir and madam. You are correct, Kel. You are absolutely correct.
Hush says gnomish smoke boxes, finest gnomish drugs to explore the multiverse in style. Ren says 6 foot tall gnomes would be great. I can see it. I can totally see it. Hush says, I mean, the other idea is that it's a prank, but it makes all the Fairlings even smaller and wipes their memory so they can try again, but harder. Or level 2 of the puzzle, but you're 6 millimeters instead of 6 inches. Rosie says a mini world in a dimensional size that allows them to be gods so that they can fight the gods. Trustworthy Sean says the boxes have a fixed position, so they might be components of a ritual that spans worldwide, like Full Metal Alchemist. In terms of plot, a viable counter to the gods would be most helpful, given that we know the gnomes are at least on the same team as the Fae. I don't know about that. I think probably the most likely is that the box contains another question. If you're shaping a species to question things and pursue truth, you would be doing a disservice to that child race by giving them an end to discovery. That's beautifully put, sir. I like that. I agree.
We did have a more direct question and that people had sent to us before the talks began, which was about the gnomes. So I think maybe originally, like I said, I was going to think that maybe we could circle back and just talk about more general fun gnome theories at the end. But since we did have a serious gnome question, I wanted to get to that now. And that was, do we think that there's any meaning behind the epithet the clockmakers beyond the obvious?
I've got nothing.
Lewd Dancer did have a comment, so they responded saying, I was wondering if the gnomes could mess with time. And maybe Gardner, it looks like you wanted to speak.
Yeah, I had a thought that maybe, like, when we see clockmakers, right? I think back to a lot of Dungeons and Dragons stuff about like clockwork gnomes, or even like World of Warcraft stuff with the whole idea of the clockwork gnome. I wonder if maybe gnomes were perhaps the progenitors of like the first proto golem, or something like that. And clockmakers maybe is beyond just the idea of like a clock, but maybe to something more like, clockwork beings.
Do you think that they may? I mean, this is super crack theory. Since we're not getting too many responses yet, and I do want to give people time to kind of formulate or respond to the question. Is there any chance that because the way that what we learned in the chapter is that they stopped having kids, that they decided to pass along themselves willingly, essentially, and with what you were talking about, like making proto-golems or making like new forms of like life, maybe even, it's like, could the Frerlings be an engineered species? Could they have been made by the gnomes?
That was something that I had thought as well. I thought that ever since I heard about the Frelings at first, and thought about like kind of how the elves had become the half-elves solely because of genetics, and like they talk about that even in this chapter. Like maybe the Frelings are, some kind of like you said, engineered species. It makes sense to me. It does seem to follow potentially.
I mean, we know they're a magical species just because, like, at least as far as we can tell, physics is the same, kind of, and the square cube law is a thing, kind of. So there's some fuckery going around in their organs.
I think we do know that the Frerlings are a magical species, in part because of the allotment and because when they gather together naturally, it changes the ambient mana. Like they're all like little sage-grass reeds walking around. Like their bodies contain mana, and like I feel like that has to be part of not just being like a sentient species, but like you said, the fact that they're able to sustain themselves in the way that they do, the fact that they can like drink more than the entire volume of their bodies, that has to go somewhere. There's obviously some kind of like mass to magic conversion ratio or something going on, otherwise they would just die. you would just literally drown. Instead of being a happy little tiny drunk, you would just be a very, very dead drunk after like a thimbleful of fire breath whiskey or something.
Yeah, I wonder what the difference is, in regards to the Frerlings. Yeah, because they're super magical, obviously, but where is the line drawn, right? Like how much is flesh and how much is magic? Because at that size, with clearly like dimensional magic in their stomach and like God knows what magic it takes to make their blood flow or their brain work. But if they're really just a bunch of dimensional magic stuffed into a little flesh puppet, how far are they off from just being Ginny?
So Violet had two comments, which I think are quite good. So first one is Gnome TARDIS, which, thank you. Obviously, that would be amazing. That would be either for the boxes or for just in general, I think. And then Violet, Frerlings are Fae and Gnome babies. Sivseer had, and again, please correct me if I'm mispronouncing everything, because I'm kind of fumbling my words here, so apologies. If I do mispronounce anybody's name, please feel free to correct me. Seems like a dick move to engineer Frerlings. What is my purpose? You suffer. And that's kind of like the butter robot, or poor butter robot. In-world produces species like they're going out of style, so you can see drakes, stitchfolk, spiderfolk, sylphids, djinn, etc. So there are a lot of known engineered species.
Mm-hmm. But like I said, there's not that much difference between a Frerling and a purely magical construct like a Ginny. It's not that different. It's just like you have to admit most of the Frerling is dimensional magic because they can think and their blood flows and like they can eat an entire chicken.
Seems like we have some people who disagree, and I definitely would like to invite them to comment. So Lou Dancer saying, I don't think that's necessarily true. So some skepticism on that. And then Spanner's like, the Lilliputians made it work. Why not Frerlings? And I think we had one more person who was considering like had a different point or a different view. And was that in general that they were not magical beings, or like that they had their own, or that, because again, it's a super crack theory. I was just throwing that out there to buy time. But like if they were an engineered race, it wouldn't be that different than what we'd seen on In-World, because like Sivseer said, you had the drakes, stitchfolk, spiderfolk, sylphids, djinn, genie. I mean, I guess even as we learned in this, to a certain extent, half-elves or other creatures like that would result from magical, non-magical pairings, or from the weird way that in-world reproduction seems to work with some species. So there's a lot of things going down. I don't think it's that out there, but yeah, I admit there's not a lot. There's no like textual evidence. That's why it's still a crack theory.
Edge Dancer says that the gnomes were such famous tricksters. And Sean, we got a call back there to the time travel being now foreshadowed. Hold on to your hats, everyone. Deanna Mella opened the door by sending a message back in time. Comrade Burv says, I did have a theory that what's in the box can be used to hurt or even kill the gods, but because all of the gnomes knew about and believed in the gods, they couldn't actually use the weapon they made. So they left the puzzle behind, hoping that the Fairlings could use it in a way akin to shooting a gun with a blindfold on.
Spanner has a really interesting comment, I think. He said, the aliens from the land of the Fae were smaller. The gnomes are the second furthest travelers. They could have brought the Fairlings along. They might be a different world. So they could, considering even humans or Earthers are definitely aliens. Earthers are not from Inverse, even if humans maybe are from Inverse, question mark. I think almost all to a certain extent, I think it would not be that surprising if there were a lot of aliens on InWorld.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it tracks. We know there's a bajillion gates.
And if you want to speak, please ping the mod so that we can call you out. Blue Dancer says lots of beings in Inverse don't follow physics as we know it. I thought the magic when they gathered was the same result as when lots of human mages gather. Result in a lot of mana. That's what they're covering up, population density and enchantments. See, now I agree with that, because if everything and everybody produces or generates magic, but living things do so more, then yeah, you need to hide your magical signature, not just because you're making it yourself, but because you're using it and creating large little blips of.
I think we learned something contrary to that, though, when we were talking about Hexel and talking about like engineering list score, because the ambient magic was dipping lower because the more people drawing on magic in the area and the less it became usable. And so they were talking about needing to potentially increase the mana capacity in the area, even though they've got a freaking dungeon that they're sitting on top of. And so it seems like large concentrations of people actually usually strain magical resources rather than naturally increasing them or naturally growing them. I don't think that it's necessarily foolproof either way. I think that's why it's a good point of debate, because we've got contrary evidence in the text as well as supporting evidence. Because I think everything that you said is accurate. And I also think that we had the stuff from Hexel, which is a little bit weird. Like part of why Aaron, or why they were looking at trying to bring in gnolls or people to host some kind of magical crop in the floodplains. So Subseer said, I think I've made a critical mistake. I've proved an example that works against my theory. I think Fairlings evolve naturally. They could just be cursed humans by the gods who got Honey, I Shrunk the Kids treatment, or just emerged from somebody who wanted to be small and had kids, a polymorph spell, etc., etc. I don't think the Fairlings are like Stitchfolk and Drakes who were designed, but I think that they were made in some way. I just don't think that it was intentional. Edmund, I think I'm going to skip that comment. Sorry. Edmund had a more of a suggestion than a question. Violet, weird deal with Belavier, maybe, or Bella, maybe. That's a name I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce because I will fail. So I'm just going to go with the nickname Bella.
Edge Dancer says one of the things they mentioned to increase mana was get more mages. Fairlings have lots of mages. Basic training was learning tier 1 through 3 spells. That's a lot of potential mages.
Yeah, I think the fact that like a normal person is supposed, like just a normal recruit is supposed to learn tier 1 through 3 magic, it kind of push, and the fact that it's part of like a general education as well, it does seem to say like they might be an innately magical species, because we know that even in humans or in other sentient races, the ability to use mana as a mage does and cast structured spells isn't universal. So like even if it was just that they universally had the ability to cast magic, that would be something. I think we saw that might be the case with races. Like we know that like the lizard folk are innately magical. I think we've had them called out for that. Half elves being innately magical because of their half immortality, and then I think we've had a similar kind of call out for older races that were immortal, like giants or dwarves. And dragons, obviously. And everybody wants them bones, them magic bones.
Hush says that's why they said that Paeth sucks too much magic in and acts as a siren for magical creatures. Kel says, Mears has also said any number of times that tiny amounts of tall folk food and drink can sustain a whole lot of Fairlings. They can pack away food, but that may be more a physiological thing, like birds eating their own body weight of food per day simply to sustain their metabolism.
That's a good comment. I actually do kind of want to circle back to Edmund's comment because they mentioned Gulliver's Travels, and I think we had another Lilliputian comment in here earlier in the chat. Does anybody like enjoy the allegory or enjoyed like the like Fairlings having a similar thing to Gulliver's Travels, and that they're teaching like the Earthers who are used to their kind of superiority complex about the technology and about the culture, that it's kind of being reflected back to them in the little folk who are like, again, unimpressed. Like, you can't cure the common cold. Scrubs.
I'm sure you don't even think about what you're drinking.
Then we did have Spanner saying, wasn't it only a general education for Tall Guard, which is a very specific job that only some can do? That is fair. But the fact that they were just so matter of fact about like non-mages in the Tall Guard learning first through third tier magic spells was, I think, it seemed indicative that that's like a wider, more common practice.
And Mears was apparently Tall Guard and didn't even know Spark. He learned it when he's, 50 years later after he's already left the villages. He had no interest in magic at all. So either they've changed the curriculum.
Could be a textual inconsistency, but also like Nears is not very typical. We can kind of see him maybe trying to Core because he was so insistent on only having one class and did not want to get mage or get magic and potentially have the system try and offer him a mage related class or screw up his build, since he only wanted the one class. That's a basic question, I guess. Do we think that the Frarlings know about the secretive levels that used to be super important, and the big thing of worth that Ryoka was going to give to the gnolls, that the levels are much easier to gain if you only have the one class? Rosie, you wanted to comment?
Yeah, I think it's a pretty safe assumption, only because clearly they have a lot of record keeping for all of their discoveries. It would make sense that they do one of them might be a mathematician and does some statistics seeing who leveled what when, and they clearly have all of these very specialized and unique classes that to me scream of someone being like, oh, you're a mage and you really like to build stuff. Here's this one class we've seen discovered. Why don't you try to go for that? And like, I feel like they probably have learned to develop classes and cultivate them in a way that a lot of species don't, because they have unity and they have record keeping, which no one else does.
They're min-maxers. Okay.
I think it helps though if you have a society behind you, though. So like you have the fact that they have all these things that are specialized and more. You can have those specific min-max classers because you have an entire apparatus, an entire culture or civilization that's supporting you, and they have non-magical or non-skills based means of helping you out. And you know that you can level pretty quickly because everything is tougher when you're 6 inches tall. Oh, Jason D, magical career guidance counselors. You absolutely know that that's a thing. There's probably even a guidance counselor. They're literally called guidances is part of their ruling classes. So I think they're probably almost 100% certainty there are guidance counselors. Do they suck as bad as human guidance counselors? We cannot say.
Civ says, Nears was a Tall Guard tactician. He might have gone through a different officer school. Well, I agree with that. He also may have been in a completely different city because apparently the cities don't talk to each other. Civ
She was
also
pointing
says,
out that the secret of leveling was inconsistently important, which is maybe fair. Like I cannot say anybody's name at all today. Important.
Kershaya.
No, Kershaya was not very impressed initially, but Kilb was. So it's again, it is kind of like a 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. Half of the people who have been presented with the fact are super impressed. Half the people are not. We are coming up on an hour of recording, so we've got mostly, like I said, because it was a lot less structured of a chapter, we've been doing things like, and because it was just so Frareling focused, we just took this first part of the discussion and have made everything really about like general questions about gnomes and Frarelings and the things that we learned in this chapter, and less about the plot points, although we did talk a little bit earlier about kind of like the general shape of what we learned about the plot against the Titans company. But we have got about 4 questions that people had come up with before that were about the actual plot and about the preparations that were being made to fight against the and preserve the cities against the attack from the lizard folks, the Jungle Tales company, and the Feather Folk Brigade. And we're just going to see if there were more questions about that. I think we're going to shift to those now. I don't think we'll need to stop the recording though, unless that is your preference, Linnet. Do you want to do one now, and so that they can be set up and as two different kind of takes, or do you want to do just one longer discussion so that we can talk about the actual pushback against the tall folk by the little folk?
I don't have a preference.
I think we're just going to do one big. If anybody's a fan of the, we'll do just one big talk. And so, on that note, Spanner actually asked one of the questions that we had, which will Gravetender's Fist join the students or the lizards? And we did actually have some Gravetender's Fist questions. So, do you think Gravetender's Fist or the UN company will play a part in the Frareling Wars? If so, what was the question that we got before the talk? And then, like I said, Spanner has also asked, will Gravetender's Fist join the students or the lizards? So he's asking, which side will Gravetender's Fist fall on? Anybody has an opinion on that? I think right now students as well. So Spanner is saying that his opinion is students. I would agree with that. Just because he's worried about losing half of his company if he doesn't side with them right now. And he was talking about going in that area to move them out. And I think once you've witnessed so many war crimes, I don't think that he's going to be like on a plan, seeing what that does to a company. I don't think that he's going to get the allure of levels or a little bit of gold to pull him away, especially with Nier's reputation and with the goodwill that he had towards the students. I just don't see him choosing the baddies in this case.
What Qualit choosing the students because of the reputation? He hasn't been told about the Frarelings yet.
That's true, but like if it's just a course of like what side will they eventually come down on? So like not, I think he'll come down.
There's 3 sides. I think right now there's 3 sides. I think we've got the lizard folk. I think we've got the students, and then I think we've got the UN. The students are okay with the fighting and protecting. The UN is really not, and they're probably going to look at these, Qualit is going to understand that the UN doesn't fight, and he's going to think that they're going to ask him to fight for them, and he's not willing to do that. But I don't think he realizes yet that the students are out there, and I don't know, it might be a coincidence that they meet up. It might be that they get put in touch with them through the Frareling connection. I'm not sure.
Violet says that they will take Talonquil, possibly, or probably. That's not a bad guess, I think. I mean, if it ends up becoming like something that foils the plot, I think that wouldn't be a bad one. If the UN ends up being proactive and ends up taking control of the city, I think that would be quite an interesting twist for things. Well, the UN, by virtue of being a part of Gravetender's Fist, I think it would be a joint effort.
I'd also like to point out, Spanner says that he won't think genocide is okay. Marsh hand, qualit, marsh hand, shaken, not scared. I think
Try and
that
read that in James Bond voice, but my cold is getting the better of me.
no, I definitely can't pull that off. But
Marsh hand,
I
qualit, marsh hand, shaken, not scared.
much better than I could have done. I don't think Qualit is as queasy about killing as we hope he would be, because he stopped being a suppression company and he turned his people into an actual army. So he fights living people now instead of the undead.
So Loot Dancer had the point that I will note that Peklir is in Talanquil. So I think that things with Niers, Peklir will come to a head between them there, just probably not this volume. I think that might be fair, because I think a lot of what we're seeing is the escalation of multiple storylines towards a conclusion, but not an end. So like these are like, I don't think that we're going to see all these threads tied together neatly by the beginning of volume 9. I think they're just getting to the places where they need to be. So like assuming that there's going to be more mustache twirling villain action in volume 9 is probably a fair bet from Loot Dancer. I would agree with them.
Civ thinks that Qualit is going to side with the anti-burn the jungle down. It's going to be hugely impactful economically to everyone in the surrounding area, destroying lumber, food, alchemic ingredients, etc. He doesn't have to side with the Freylings, he just needs to side against burning down a large jungle.
So that brings up another question that we had. Since, I mean, if anybody, please keep comments and questions coming if you have them. But we had another question about tactics, and that was, if you were part of the force that was looking for path and fleeing refugees, what kind of techniques would you use, or would you be using to find them? So, like, trying to put yourself in the shoes of the baddies for a second. If it was your job to go and hunt for some tiny fleeing people, where would you go looking, and how would you look? Because I mean, we're talking about burning down the jungle to try and smoke them out, and among other things, which is a war crime, maybe. although we don't have those yet on InWorld.
Civ says that burning down the jungle would be by far the easiest method. Spanner says that there are rules of war, though, on Beleros, and Jungle Tales aren't following them. Follett will take umbrage with that, given what he's gone through.
Yeah, that was my much bungled comment earlier. Just saying that because he got half of his current company is composed of people who left to disgraced companies that he saw crumble because they, even though they didn't technically violate rules of war, they violated like all the gentlemen's agreements and things that exist, and they used all sorts of nasty tactics and nasty enchanted that people would probably ban if we ever have a Geneva Convention in this world.
Maybe says that gotta say burning down the jungles is 11 out of 10 strategy, but it made me literally sick to my stomach to read it, though.
Comrade Verd, I think you took me in the office. I actually quite love the mustache twirling villainy, and I'm hoping that Peklir, because he can change his shape and change his body and get to be what he wants, and I truly hope that he decides to embody a mustache twirling villain, because all the villains are complex, and except for Pursuer, all the villains are complex in TWI and have big motives and everything, and I think it'd just be nice to have one like cackling baddie, and I would love it if it's him, especially because we could say the butler did it. But Comrade Bird was saying that he's reacting to the criticism saying of mustache twirling villainy in particular, but it must be clear that genocides have happened and are currently happening in our IRL for much less. We'll keep that to InWorld specific, because there are some that are ongoing there. Obviously there's goblins are pretty much killed on sight, and we also have the dragons, the Shield Kingdoms, and the way that the Immortals are worried about if they expose themselves, what people's reaction would be. And we know that the lizard, there's been secret kind of like implications that like lizard folk have been particularly genocide happy in the past. There was only a couple of times that's been mentioned in the text, but like that a lot of the races that used to no longer exist thanks to them. And so a surprisingly dark undercurrent for the very friendly folk.
Visionary says that as far as fighting back against the forest fire, he says the UN might use the explosives to cut off the forest fire and destroy the fire fuel, which I think he means like a fire break. As a side note, Tall Guards and the Bushwhacker have a similar.
Bushrangers.
Yeah, it's the Bushrangers, but he typed Bushwhacker, and I had to say it. I'm
I think he
sorry.
did because like I think that might be like an American. I don't know if that's an Australian thing or an American thing because I mean like that's like an American slang. I think maybe posing as Australian slang or like so maybe some wires got crossed there. But Bushrangers, yes.
Rosie responds with that, or you could work with the Fairlings to turn bomb tech into fire foam bomb tech that'll stop the fire. Ooh, I like that plan.
So Trustworthy Sean has a comment about tactics, how he would get in the shoes of the baddies here. I would look for Path using detect magic sweeps. It's burning through its allotment and must be a shining magical beacon in the forest right now. Normally this wouldn't be the case, but because we have confirmation they successfully took down one Fairling city, you can anticipate and abuse Path's inability to abandon its fellow Fairlings against it.
Mm-hmm.
So this, and we have kind of some comments here that are appreciating our mustache twirling villain. That you got to respect a man who decides instead of becoming a mage studying shape-shifting, he decided to become a double agent in the Forgotten Wing, where Foliana is the boss and he just casually hangs around and is impossible to spot. So yeah, you have to say like the fact that he was able to pull it off for years really does speak to his professionalism there. And you've done that.
Violet
Gardner,
says,
if you wanted to speak.
I was just gonna say it's interesting to me because one of the selling points I often use to like get people into the Wandering Inn is I say pretty much everybody in the book that we've heard about so far has a redemption arc if they do anything negative or bad. So this advent of like mustache twirling Pecklear is pretty interesting to me because it feels like we haven't had someone who was doing this on such a grand scale yet. There's been people who've done this on like a much more minor scale, but to see this on like the grand scale of affecting like continental change or continental disaster is wild. And I can't like we've seen this with Tyrion with the Goblin March, obviously. Like he did some heinous stuff there, obviously, like with his like goblin genocide, that was awful. But then we get the Tyrion redemption arc. I don't think we're going to see that with Peckler. I think he's going to go down as just the unredeemed mushroom or mustache twirling villain.
Really hope so.
I'm okay with you calling him a mushroom twirling villain at this point. You could absolutely say that.
Yeah. Really hope it's the case just because, like I said, it would offer some contrast. It's one of the genuinely great things about the series is that we have a lack. I mean, we don't lack for antagonists, but we do lack for proper villains in a good way because people are people in here and they're presented as such and they're not made as caricatures of themselves unless they're Pursua, and she deserves it.
No argument here.
Asteria, you wanted to comment?
I just want to say, you guys, we have the simplistic, non-redeemable character. We haven't been with him for a while, but what about the King and Chandrar that decided to, the Adventurer King?
Ooh, yeah, we do hate the Burger King.
The Burger King?
Oh, BK. Sorry, Blighted King. Wrong King.
Hurik. The guy who's attacking Fetto right now?
Oh, Purik. We do have our unredeemable. Well, maybe unredeemable is too mean. But
the guy who kidnapped Raelt. We had a whole
not getting a redemption arc.
Chapter. Right. Okay. Eric, yes.
Thank you for reminding me of his existence. That is brilliant. That is a brilliant contribution. Maybe that should be the next ship. We'll have Pecklear x Purik because like they deserve each other.
Actually, I'm just gonna throw out real quickly. Why are all of our villains that are kind of unredeemable? Why don't all their names start with P?
Yazdil is unredeemable.
Perusa, Piclear, Peric. I mean, it's like a trend.
Oh
Yeah.
no! Common member of the P stands for pirate, their own worst enemy. And Lewd Dancer followed that up with Pirate Abba, the unredeemable villain. Oh no! And then Spanner's like, it's like, but Termin begins with a T.
Kel says, I floated the theory in Acid Chat that maybe Yazdil, who is known as the Naga, has had a hand in this. That's a terrifying thing. I don't wish to speak about it right now.
He's also a shape changer. We don't really understand the method by which he does it, but he shifts between human and Naga, and even it's not described in the kind of a similar way as we've seen other shape changers in the show, or in the have shown themselves to do the act. Like, it's quite painful, it seems like, and quite odd, and so far unexplained. So I don't know. It would not be impossible to believe that that Peclear was one of his agents, even.
We're probably going to be wrapping up shortly. Last minute comments from folks. I think we do have a song that we're going to be given this evening, which we're going to be pinging here in a little bit, maybe. But if you've got access to the doc and you see anything else that you'd like to mention about anything on there, please go ahead and speak up.
We had a general question about, again, in the same kind of field as earlier, and it was about what will be like Path's downfall. I mean, because we've seen, like, again, the main defense of all these settlements has been their secrecy, and so if that's removed, what is the big defense? And so, like, essentially, like, do you think we're gonna win? Do you think that our little friends in the chapter title are going to make it through? Are they going to be able to defend the city?
I hope so.
That was too sad, maybe. I think people are contemplating. Like, I think that was the issue. Like I said, why I kind of consider him the mustache twirling villain, or like I would be fine with him being that, is because the Frailings are so bloody likable. I don't think we've met even the traitors have been likable. Like, I don't think we've met any Frailings so far that have been just like, if I met this person, I'd want to punch them in their tiny face. It's just like they've all just been written universally quite interesting, and I think maybe it just is. It's definitely hard to root against the underdogs in these scenarios.
Sibsir says he hopes someone dies. Of course you say that. You always say that. Stop saying that.
On that note, like, if we are going to look for somebody who gets a redemption arc, or who does have a complex bit of treachery or villainy, does anybody like have any theories about like some of the kids or the students who might betray? Like, Omina we had a one moment earlier in one of the chapters where they were talking about the lizard folk company, and then we flashed to Omina and then flashed back to something else. And even though I don't think it was implied that she's like a traitor, but I mean, it would be something that could be potentially down the line. I could see.
Yeah, I had a theory about that, but I like her. I hope I'm wrong.
If you want to, because usually we have a likable antagonist, and if there is one that's planted in here, I think it would be likely to be her. It would be my thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
So
Kel
Kel
says, I would hope that Niers would have prioritized getting back to Baleros if he thought the Frere cities were all going to burn. Yeah.
that does kind of echo my thoughts from earlier, from the very beginning, because it just seemed like the entire time he has not put a priority on returning home, and I don't think it's just a matter of him being overconfident about his own company's response. I think he's probably has some faith in the abilities of the cities and of whatever contingency plans are in place. We'll give a Cameral shout out just because, like you said, he's never been mentioned the entire discussion. So now he's been mentioned. He exists. He's the Dullahan student. And that's about all I can say about him. Oh, this is an interesting comment. Jason has got a comment saying he thinks that the war walkers with Gravetender's fist might step in to protect the Frere once they learn there are civilians involved. Let's be honest. If the war walkers react to tiny sentient beings with "oh my god, they're cute, must protect," knowing that there are literally millions of little teeny tiny Frereling babies that they would be protecting, I feel like that would definitely tug on their heartstrings.
Mm. We may be ready for our song, I think. Is that about?
If you've got it queued up, and you can put that in there, I would welcome it. But so yeah, we're wrapping things up here. Like I said, if you have any kind of closing comments, if you would like to speak, or if you'd like to read out a joke, again, Oshi is not here. Puns are going to be allowed. So if you want to get those puns out of your system, now would be the opportunity. Got some folks typing, maybe considering, but if not, if you can get do you have the song queued up, Linnet?
He says minute or two.
Oh, what was your previously ignored comment, Burv? And you can feel free to speak if you'd like to speak as well, or if you can repost it. Oh, you stepped away. I think we did actually address your previous comment, Burv. Yeah, we did actually. So we went kind of way early in the discussion. We were talking about the what might the gnome, or maybe why did the gnomes decide to stop reproducing and things of that nature. And we did actually bring that back up. So that was what his initial comment he was referring to. Was anyone before? I mean, we've only got a minute or two here, but was anyone else surprised that we learned so much about the elves? I did not think that this was going to be the chapter that would happen.
Surprised by several things in this chapter. The spooky hallway. I'm turning on every light now before going down a hallway in a building I'm walking in from now on. Just, the sixth continent. Yes, that was a nice lore drop.
So, trustworthy Sean, you wanted to speak?
Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, learning about the elves was incredible this chapter. Just because I've had the question for years, what happened to the elves? Where did they go? And we finally got that answer. And the exact same time that we get the answer, we get like 3 more new incredibly pressing questions. What's in the lost box? Where was this lost continent? And like the answers have been replaced by even more burning questions. And I really appreciated that. But learning about the elves was very neat. I'm not sure that that's 100% the answer because we still haven't seen elves in the afterlife, and the Fae have this really weird hatred of half elves, which seems to go beyond it. But I mean, I would totally accept that they just got slowly bred out over the years. Yeah,
Kind of seems to be the implication, like from the way that the elves or like the Fae look at keep calling them words. Maybe we won't repeat here, but it seems to be that they're calling them out for sleeping with mortals, and because that was killing their race. And so the more the half elves reproduced, the less elves there were until there were no elves left, and so that would kind of predispose them to being like, you literally have screwed yourselves to death. So like that's it's quite awful, but yeah, I mean it seemed to be the implication. So Seer says elves are just fae. There's a different variation of fae, brownies, satyrs, etc. I will die with this theory. Titania did run away with a mortal, creating the first half elf? Question mark? Exclamation point. Pat had a question about leaders of JT being called Wormgraced and Dragon Touched, raises the question of whether lizard folk actually have some sort of relation, or if it's just a cute screw you to the Drakes. Banner is saying elves are goblins. We all know that.
We don't all know that. We don't all agree with that. Hey! Hey, Disc. Welcome. I understand we have a musical composition for the evening.
We do.
That is wonderful. We're going to wrap all of this up then, I think. Any other comments? Everybody's done? That was a wonderful discussion. We are, of course, after our song, are going to be stopping the recording, and then you are all welcome, of course, to continue talking and or typing or discussing amongst each other. But we're going to close out tonight, sounds like, with a composition from our body bard.
Yes. Not body today, but, you know.
Sorry, the label is stuck now. It's on your forehead. You just can't see it.
It is. I mean, honestly, like I said, I've never considered myself particularly body, but, you know, it did start out that way, and I have never not had the heart to change a label that was bestowed by Pirate.
You are wise, sir.
So that's kind of how that goes. All right. So this one is a present for Asteria, I should say. I will also say that in, I guess, deference to their hometown, there will be approximately 300 times as much swearing as there is in all previous works combined.
I'm going to mute myself because this is going to be hilarious.
Which is
I am going to do the same. So this is all you.
All right. So it's a little bit sad that didn't get to do this during birthday week because for Asteria, good King Raelt. Well, let me introduce Raelt. He's the king of Jacrass. You say only top 100, you can kiss my ass. Because when you rank kings, you think of that bling, but any old thing can make you kiss the ring. Now, Tyrandrian rulers don't raid our sand. Raelt gives us oranges from his own hands because he's the best of the best. All other monarchs are his lesser. Do you know how hard it is to grow this fruit in the desert? So you take your blighted king and that warmonger floss when you put him next to Raelt, beef and feta hep straws. We don't have a relic hoard of 10,000 years of history. Nobody sails across the sea to learn at our frontistery. Buried underneath our palace, no world-shaking mystery. Now, some have the name, and some have the levels, and some gain the fame from dancing with the devil. Some toot their own horn, they preen and they cluck, but you want a pompous fool, you're shit out of luck. It's just good King Raelt with the policies sound, and he keeps both feet planted on the ground to steer the ship estate so it doesn't get wrecked, while he keeps the greedy nobles of the courts his check. When his niece was abandoned and left all alone, he took her in as his daughter and he raised her on his own. No endless ever-changing dungeon sporting its bespoke biome. No level 50 fighters and no martial artist Thunderdome. No famous named adventurers to call our kingdom home sweet home. Just a beat-up centaur matriarch whose tribe is all too tired to roam. Well, I've extolled all his virtues of the peaceful times, but when it comes down to war, Raelt commits no crime. No grandiose speeches with a bellowing growl. He simply turns to his army and he shouts, "Morale!" He's the good King Raelt. He's the best King Raelt. Got a shining gold belt tucked into his belt. The king of challenges lays it on the line to protect his people, and he looks damn fine. Before anybody can say on guard, he got the king of destruction with a sword through the heart. Don't even mention King Purit Rat, king of disgrace, because the father and the daughter both spat in his face. Now Jacana's on the throne, ruling keener than king, our very own death's friend. She's the arbiter queen, so give it up for the royal family of Jacrass. Like Cecil Wordsmith, you kiss our ass. Good King Raelt.
That's awesome. Oh my God. You had, and yeah, I'm sitting here and I'm like, yeah, it really is kind of hard to grow oranges in the desert. It is. Yeah, that's impressive. I really.
I love it. That was the best present ever. I'm so excited. Thank you so much, Discantor. Oh, that was amazing.
Do we know that Discantor is not actually a two-headed titan?
We don't know that. None of us have ever met in person.
That is true. I don't I think Minorkle has a bit better voice than I do. He has a head for melody that I don't.
But
Well, I love it.
Yes.
That was amazing. That was super awesome. I love it. Very awesome job. Thank you so much.
Yay.
On that very, very epic note, I think we're going to have to conclude the actual recorded portion of the discussion. Everybody is more than welcome to stick around. Thank you for letting us host this week, and we just look forward to more hype on our next discussion for Wednesday, and for more hopefully tiny shenanigans. And thank you all for coming today.